This is just a bit of a video on what I call frankenstrings. They're basically modified Christmas light strings, usually because, usually I modify them because part of them failed in some way and it's really not possible to repair. In the case of this particular string, it was originally a 100 light, 2-circuit string, basically two separate circuits of 50 lamps each. And the first string had failed where some of the lamps were broken. Some of them were actually missing little plastic thingamajigs that hold the lamps in the lamp holders. And because there are many different, on the order of probably hundreds or thousands, of different mechanically non-interchangeable variants of those, it's basically impossible to repair unless I could find identical strings to get spare lamps from. What I did is I could basically cut the bad light wire, because there's 3 wires, 2 of which are feeders, 1 of which has the lamp holders. So I just cut the wire with all the lamp holders out and spliced it. So it was soldered and then 2 layers of electrical tape, and this is the Scotch 35 high-end American-made stuff that's, a couple bucks a reel, but it tends to be, or a couple bucks a roll, but it tends to be fairly reliable. Problem is you can't get it Home Cheapo anymore. Just Chinese rubbish that they sell for the same price as they used to sell the good stuff. But anyway, that's just so that I've got a string where there's about, I think about a 8 or 10 foot leader on it that isn't lit, which is advantageous if where you want lights is far from your feeder point. Which, when you get into decent scale Christmas lighting setups, is something you run into a lot. Then there's this string, which I did the same thing to, but years ago. This is actually one of the oldest LED sets I own. These are Sylvania branded Cool Glow lamps. These actually are lights. These I got back in, I think, 2007. And what happened is that this string was actually in use outside for many months, and the bottom, or the first string of LEDs failed because of very severe corrosion. It was actually a big problem, and it still is a big problem with LEDs. I think there was a requirement in about 2011 that you had to use more corrosion-resistant leads on the LEDs. But then again, but I haven't really had a chance to test that, and really can't afford to. Just because of the cost of getting a whole bunch of strings and running them outside continuously for months on end. And so yeah, this is one that I did back in 2008 or 2009, so I'm probably going to be replacing the electrical tape on those. But that's another thing where it's basically just the same thing. These are 2 unmodified strings. I was actually going to do it to this one, but then I found an intact LED in one of the strings that I actually used to make this, which I'll get to in a bit, and I substituted that in the base thing, and that string fully works now. And then there's this one, which I made from 2 separate strings. Actually, I was going to make 2 separate extension cords like this, but then one of them, the plug was very severely corroded and didn't work, so I basically spliced that onto another extension cord. So I've now got about a 20 or 30 foot, actually probably more like 30 odd foot extension cord that just has an intermediate receptacle halfway along its length, as well as one at the end. And of course, again, risk of electrocution, don't try this at home, blah blah blah. Usual safety gush, or guff. So yeah, but there's a typical fused plug. And fuse plug, blah blah blah, TS, that's Ting Shin, who seemed to be a major OEM of Christmas lighting components. And so yeah. And of course, also for safety reasons, these things are also only used outside, really. But then again, I only have a couple of dedicated sets that I use for indoor decorations, and those stay up all year because those are wired into a couple of inverter circuits for emergency lighting. So yeah, it's just a thing.